You've been told that progress means moving forward, that the past is something to leave behind, that nostalgia is just a trick your mind plays when the present feels too demanding. But what if everything you've been taught about finding peace is backwards? What if the secret to sleeping deeply in our anxious, overstimulated world isn't found in the latest meditation app or wellness trend, but in the cobblestone streets of places that refused to rush, in the soft candlelight of towns that never forgot how to breathe? Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. We've engineered rest right out of our lives, replaced the peaceful rhythm of night with blue screens and notification sounds, traded the gentle storytelling of our ancestors for the aggressive content, feeds that promise relaxation while delivering the opposite. The irony is almost painful. We're more connected than ever, yet lonelier, more informed, yet more anxious, more entertained, yet more restless. Tonight, you're going to experience something radically different, something that goes against every impulse modern life has trained into you. You're not going to try harder to sleep. You're not going to fight your thoughts or force your body into submission. Instead, you're going to take a walk, not a real one, but one that's perhaps more genuine than most real walks you've taken lately through old towns where time moves differently, where the evening whispers carry wisdom our culture has forgotten. These aren't fantasy places or invented sanctuaries. They're real, and their timeless calm has been quietly offering refuge to tired souls for centuries, while we've been busy inventing complicated solutions to problems they solved long ago. The comforting atmosphere you'll encounter isn't manufactured or designed. It's simply what happens when human beings create spaces intended to last for generations rather than fiscal quarters. What you're about to hear will probably contradict advice you've received from sleep experts, productivity gurus, and wellness influencers. There are no breathing exercises here, no body scans, no instructions to clear your mind, because here's what they don't tell you. Your mind doesn't need to be cleared. It needs to be occupied with something that actually matters. Something that engages your imagination without demanding your anxiety. The nostalgic charm of these cozy historical places works on a level deeper than technique because it speaks to something fundamental about human nature or need for continuity, for connection to something larger than ourselves, for the soothing narration of stories that remind us we're not the first to feel lost, tired, or overwhelmed. You're going to discover that the echoes of the past aren't burdensome or depressing. They're actually the most comforting sound you can hear when everything in your present feels too heavy to carry alone. So here's what I'm offering you tonight. A calm journey through time that requires nothing from you except willingness to let your imagination walk where your body cannot. No goals, no metrics, no trying, just the warm light through old windows, the sound of slow rain on ancient stones, and the quiet history that still lives in places wise enough to resist the tyranny of the new. This isn't escapism, it's remembering. And by the end of this night, you might find yourself sleeping not because you've been tricked or medicated into it, but because you've finally reconnected with the bedtime calm that's your birthright as a human being who belongs to a long, long line of people who knew how to rest. The question isn't whether you deserve this peace, you do, but whether you're ready to receive it in a form that doesn't come with a price tag, a prescription, or a promise of self. Are you ready to simply be tired and to let that be enough? There's something almost sacred about the way an old town breathes at dusk, when the cobblestone streets start to glisten under soft candlelight and the air carries whispers of centuries past. She walks slowly through these cozy historical places, feeling the weight of time beneath her feet, noticing how each weathered facade tells a story that refuses to fade. The windows glow with warm light through old windows, casting golden rectangles onto the wet pavement below, creating a mirror world where past and present dance together. It's not just visual beauty, it's the scent of old wood, the cool mist settling on her shoulders, the distant echo of footsteps that might be hers or might belong to someone who walked here 100 years ago. This isn't tourism, this is communion with quiet history, a gentle immersion into something far deeper than any guidebook could capture. Each window that glows against the darkening sky holds its own universe. And if you pause long enough, you'll notice they're not all the same shade of gold. Some flicker with the inconsistency of real flame, others beam steadily with the confidence of well-tended lamps, and a few seem almost hesitant, as if the person inside isn't quite sure whether to welcome the night or fear it. She's learned, through years of wandering these old towns, that each window, a sissa, is like a memory that refuses to sleep, stubborn, persistent, determined to cast its light into the world even when darkness seems inevitable. You can tell so much about a place by the way its windows face the evening. Are they defiant or welcoming, isolated or communal? The nostalgic charm here isn't manufactured for visitors. It's earned through generations of people who simply kept showing up, kept lighting their lamps, kept living. The reflection on the wet stones creates something unexpected, a kind of timeless calm that only exists in this precise moment when rain has just stopped and night hasn't fully arrived. She remembers a particular evening years ago, traveling alone through a small town in the countryside, when she felt completely untethered from everything familiar. The loneliness was almost physical, pressing against her chest, until she heard the steady trickle of water from an old fountain in the square. That sound, so simple, so constant, somehow made her feel connected to every other person who'd ever stood in that spot feeling lost. It wasn't magical thinking. It was the realization that certain sounds, certain scenes, have been comforting humans for so long that they've become a kind of universal language. The peaceful night doesn't erase our worries, but it does remind us they're not new. Walking through these evening whispers of architecture and atmosphere, she's struck by how little has changed in the essentials. Sure, the shop signs might be different, the clothing styles evolved, but the basic human need for shelter, warmth, and light remains absolutely constant. A mother calls her child inside for dinner, just as mothers have done here for 300 years. An elderly man locks his shop door with the same deliberate care his grandfather probably used. The slow rain begins again, gentle and familiar, and instead of running for cover, people simply adjust pulling collars higher, walking a bit faster, accepting this as part of the evening's character. This is what makes these places different from modern cities. They haven't tried to eliminate discomfort or control every variable. They've simply learned to move with the weather, with the seasons, with time itself. There's a particular alchemy that happens when old stone meets candlelight, meets the particular blue of early evening, and she's chasing that feeling tonight. Not to capture it or own it, but simply to remember that such moments exist. That the world still contains pockets where you can step outside the relentless pace of modern life and breathe at a different rhythm. The comforting atmosphere here isn't about luxury or amenities, it's about authenticity, about places that have earned their character through use rather than design. As she continues walking, her footsteps finding the familiar rhythm of these ancient stones, she becomes aware of other presences, not threatening, but companionable, the sense that these streets have welcomed countless solitary wanderers before her, and each one has left something invisible but tangible behind. The cobblestone streets seem to remember everyone who's ever walked them, and if you listen carefully in the quiet hours, you can almost hear the echoes layering on top of each other like transparent pages in an ancient book. She passes a small bakery where warm light spills through the window, and inside she can see a figure moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who's done this same dance 1,000 times before. The padero works through the night while the town sleeps, his hands shaping dough in movements his father taught him, which his grandfather taught before that. There's something profoundly moving about watching someone perform a ritual that connects them to centuries of predecessors, all of whom stood in similar kitchens, breathing in similar scents, feeling the same satisfaction of creation. This isn't just work. It's a kind of gentle storytelling, where the narrative is passed through muscle memory rather than words. Across the narrow street, in a second-story window, an elderly woman appears briefly to light a candle before an old photograph. She does this every evening at the same hour, and though the narrator doesn't know the story behind the ritual, she doesn't need to. The gesture itself carries weight, the deliberate striking of the match, the careful shielding of the flame, the moment of stillness before the woman retreats back into her private world. These small acts of continuity are what give old towns their soul, their sense of being inhabited rather than merely occupied. The woman might be honoring a lost husband, a departed parent, or simply maintaining a tradition passed down through her family. Whatever the reason, she's participating in something larger than herself, adding one more link to a chain that stretches back through time. The past doesn't disappear, it changes clothes and continues walking through these streets, inhabiting new bodies, but maintaining the same essential rhythms. This is what modern cities often lack, the visible continuity between generations, the sense that today's actions are part of an ongoing conversation with yesterday. In these cozy historical places, you can see it everywhere in the way shopkeepers arrange their displays just as their predecessors did. In the routes people take through the streets worn smooth by countless footsteps, in the times when lights come on and go off. A man sweeps the steps of his small shop with the same broom his father used, not because he can't afford a new one, but because this one still works, still feels right in his hands. The vintage serenity here isn't nostalgic in a sentimental way. It's practical, born from the wisdom that not everything new is better. She thinks about her own life, about the routines she maintains without quite knowing why, the way she makes coffee, the route she walks, the small rituals that structure her days. How many of these came from her parents, her grandparents? How many are her own inventions that might someday be passed down? There's comfort in realizing we're all part of this vast relay race, carrying forward traditions we didn't create and won't see completed. The peaceful rhythm of night in places like this makes such thoughts feel natural rather than morbid. A couple walks past, arm in arm, moving slowly through the soft candlelight, and she wonders how many couples have walked this exact path, felt this same cool mist, looked up at these same stars. The answer is thousands, maybe tens of thousands, and somehow that doesn't diminish the moment it enriches it. What strikes her most powerfully is how little drama these lives contain, and how much meaning. The baker doesn't need to innovate daily or disrupt his industry, he simply makes bread. Well, consistently, serving a fundamental human need. The woman with her candle isn't performing for an audience or seeking validation. She's honoring something private and sacred in the only way that feels right. This is the wisdom these old towns offer, that significance doesn't require novelty, that a life well lived might look remarkably similar from one generation to the next. The evening whispers carry these lessons in the spaces between sounds, in the pause between footsteps, in the moment between lighting a match and touching it to a wick. As she continues her walk, she's beginning to understand that she's not just observing these lives. She's briefly joining them, becoming part of the endless procession of people who've found something essential in these ancient streets. The aroma reaches her before she even sees the place, that unmistakable combination of fresh bread and ground coffee that seems to bypass the nose entirely and speak directly to something deeper, more primal. She follows it like a thread through the quiet history of these cobblestone streets, turning down an alley she hasn't noticed before, though she's walked this route a dozen times. That's the thing about cozy historical places. They reveal themselves gradually, when you're ready, not when you're searching. The café sits tucked between two larger buildings, its entrance so modest you could easily miss it if you weren't paying attention. Through the old windows, warm light creates a golden invitation against the evening's deepening blue, and she can see wooden tables worn smooth by decades of elbows and coffee cups, walls the color of aged parchment, and shelves lined with books that look like they've been read rather than displayed. Inside, the air wraps around her like a familiar blanket, thick with steam, rich with scent, alive with the timeless calm that only exists in places where time has been allowed to accumulate rather than being constantly swept away. The owner looks up from behind a copper espresso machine that's probably older than she is, and his smile carries no surprise, as if he's been expecting her specifically, or perhaps as if every visitor is exactly who he expected. He's the kind of person who seems to have grown into his environment, rather than simply working in it. His movements, economical and precise. His presence reassuring without being intrusive. She orders something simple, and while he prepares it, she notices details. Photographs on the walls showing this same space across different decades. The faces changing, but the layout remaining constant. A cat sleeping in exactly the spot where afternoon sun must pool. A chess set mid-game, waiting for players who might return tomorrow or next week. When he brings her coffee, he lingers just long enough to be companionable without being presumptuous. And somehow they fall into conversation the way you do in such places, not with the performative friendliness of service workers, but with the genuine curiosity of someone who understands that every person carries stories worth hearing. He tells her the café has been in his family for 3 generations, which sounds impressive until he clarifies that in this town, 3 generations is practically modern. My grandfather bought it from a woman whose family had run it since before electricity, he explains, wiping down a table with the unconscious thoroughness of someone who's done this action 10,000 times. She told him the secret wasn't the coffee or the bread, it was understanding that people don't come here for what we serve, but for how it makes them feel. She asks what he means, and he considers the question with the seriousness it deserves, not rushing to fill the silence with easy answers. Finally, he says something that stays with her. Nobody grows old inside a place that still smells like bread. He lets that settle before continuing. What I mean is, these smells, these sounds, the hiss of the espresso machine, the scrape of chairs, the murmur of conversation, they're the same ones my grandfather heard. The same ones people heard here 50, 70, 100 years ago. When you sit here, you're not just in the present moment. You're connected to every other person who found comfort in this exact spot. It's not a rehearsed speech. You can tell he's working through the idea even as he articulates it. The bedtime calm that pervades this space isn't about silence, it's about being held by continuity, by the knowledge that this place has weathered countless individual storms and will weather countless more. As she sips her coffee, she understands what he means in a way that transcends words. There's something deeply comforting about sitting in a space that has reliably provided warmth, sustenance, and sanctuary through wars and peace, prosperity and hardship, joy and grief. The nostalgic charm here isn't manufactured. or curated its earned through sheer persistence. Through the simple act of opening the doors every day for decades, until the place itself becomes a kind of promise that some things endure, that not everything is temporary, that it's possible to create spaces that serve essential human needs without constantly reinventing themselves. She thinks about how rare this is becoming, how many places prioritize novelty over reliability, Instagram worthiness over genuine comfort. As she finishes her coffee and prepares to continue her walk, she realizes she's carried something with her from this encounter, not just caffeine and calories, but a reminder that the most profound experiences often happen in the smallest, most unassuming spaces, where the peaceful night outside and the soothing narration of steam and conversation inside create a kind of sanctuary from time itself. The bridge announces itself gradually first as a darker shape against the evening sky, then as the particular sound cobblestones make when they curve upward, finally as the unmistakable sensation of being suspended between two worlds. She pauses at the center, where the stone parapet is worn smooth by generations of hands that have rested there, contemplating the same view she's looking at now. Below, the water moves with the lazy confidence of something that's been following this route for centuries, and the reflections dancing on its surface create a second city inverted, shimmering, somehow more honest than the solid one above. The warm light through old windows multiplies, doubling itself in the water, and for a moment she can't quite tell which version is real and which is reflection. Maybe that's the point. There's a particular quality to bridges in old towns that doesn't exist in their modern counterparts. They're not just infrastructure connecting to pieces of land. They're meditation points, places deliberately designed for pause and contemplation. The architects who built this one centuries ago understood something about human psychology, that we need spaces that are neither here nor there, that exist in transition, where we can think without the pressure of having arrived. She watches the reflections shift and reform, notices how a single light source becomes a stream of golden shimmer across the water's surface, how the solid architecture of the town becomes something fluid and dreamlike when viewed through this liquid mirror, just as the city reflects in the water. We reflect in the people we love and in who we once were, our solid selves, creating wavering images in the memories of others. A couple passes behind her, their footsteps creating a rhythm on the stone, their quiet conversation a soft melody that blends with the water's murmur. She doesn't turn to look, respecting their privacy, but she's aware of them in the way you're aware of other pilgrims at a sacred site, fellow travelers in this calm journey through time. The comforting atmosphere here has nothing to do with comfort in the physical sense. The stone is hard, the wind slightly chilly, the damp air settling into her coat. But there's a different kind of comfort in being part of something larger, in standing where countless others have stood, feeling what they felt, participating in the endless human need to pause and reflect. The evening whispers seem louder here, amplified by the water, carrying voices from other nights, other moments of stillness. She finds herself thinking about mirrors, how we use them to check our appearance, but rarely to examine our essence. How we're so focused on the solid, present version of ourselves that we forget we exist simultaneously in multiple forms. There's the person we think we are, the person others see, the person we used to be, the person we're becoming. Just like these reflections in the water, all versions are real, all are shifting, none are permanent. The slow rain begins again, gentle drops disturbing the water's surface, fragmenting the reflections into abstract patterns of light and shadow. Instead of ruining the scene, the rain enhances it. reminding her that beauty doesn't require perfections. Sometimes the most profound moments come when things start to break apart and reform. The melancholy she feels isn't heavy or depressing, it's the sweet sadness of recognizing impermanence, of understanding that this moment, like all moments, exists only briefly before transforming into memory. But isn't that what makes it precious? If this bridge, this water, these reflections lasted forever, would they move her this way? The peaceful rhythm of night here teaches a different lesson than daylight provides in darkness, with only scattered lights to guide us. We see differently, more deeply, with less certainty but more truth. As she finally pulls herself away from the parapet and continues walking, she carries the image of those reflections with her, understanding that she's become part of this bridge's story now, just as it's become part of hers. And somewhere in that reciprocal relationship lies something essential about what it means to be human in these cozy historical places that refuse to forget. Every old town carries legends, like a tree carries. Rings layers of stories that have grown around kernels of truth until it's impossible to separate fact from embellishment. And maybe that separation doesn't matter anyway. An elderly man at the café had mentioned something in passing. A story about this town that she's been turning over in her mind as she walks these cobblestone streets. It goes like this. Centuries ago, a painter lived in one of these houses. A man whose work captured light in ways that seemed almost supernatural. He fell in love with a woman who played violin in the town square, and their romance became the talk of every tavern and market stall. But she was promised to another merchant from a distant city end when the time came. She left, taking nothing but her violin and a single painting he'd made of her hands. The painter never married, never left town, and spent the rest of his life creating works that grew progressively darker, as if he was painting the gradual dimming of his own hope. Here's where the legend gets interesting, where it transforms from sad story into something that touches on quiet history and timeless calm. People began noticing that on certain nights, when the wind moved through the streets just right, they could hear violin music, not recorded, not performed, but as if carried from somewhere else entirely. And in the painter's old studio, now converted into someone's apartment, the current residents claim that occasionally they'll find their windows open even when they're certain they closed them, as if someone is still trying to hear that distant music more clearly. She doesn't believe in ghosts, not in the literal sense, but she believes in the way love leaves impressions on places, how powerful emotions can saturate stones and wood until the location itself becomes a kind of monument. The nostalgic charm of stories like this isn't about whether they're factually accurate. It's about what they reveal about universal human experiences. We've all loved someone we couldn't keep. We've all felt the ache of separation, the stubborn refusal of the heart to accept what the mind knows is true. The painter and the violinist become archetypes, their specific story containing the essence of every love story that ended too soon. Every connection severed by circumstance rather than choice. They say that on silent nights, those who've loved truly still find ways to communicate across whatever distances separate them through wind, through memory, through the strange persistence of longing. Walking through these evening whispers, past windows glowing with soft candlelight, she finds herself more open to the idea that places remember. Not consciously, not the way we remember, but through accumulation, the way a path forms where people consistently walk, the way certain corners smell different because of decades of similar activities, the way some buildings just feel different when you enter them. That painter's studio, even now transformed and modernized, probably still carries something of his desperation and devotion. The square where the violinist played likely still resonates with echoes of her music, even if no one living has heard the original. This is what sleep story for adults really means, not fairy tales or fantasy, but the deeper narratives that help us understand our own experiences through the lens of those who came before. The soothing narration of wind through narrow streets does sound musical tonight. She has to admit, and while she's not prepared to call it a violin, there's definitely something about the acoustics of old towns that creates unexpected harmonies. Buildings packed close together, irregular angles, stone that's been worn into shapes that catch and redirect sound in ways modern architecture never achieves. She pauses near what might have been the painter's building. There's a plaque, faded and hard to read in the dim light, but she can make out dates and a name. The comforting atmosphere here feels different, heavier somehow, as if the air itself is saturated with story. Whether or not the legend is true becomes irrelevant. What matters is that people have believed it long enough and deeply enough that it shaped how they experience this place. And isn't that a kind of truth, too? The echoes of the past aren't always literal. Sometimes they're the way a story changes how you hear the wind, how you look at windows, how you think about love and loss, and the stubborn human refusal to let go of what matters most. The bell tower announces midnight with a voice that's both commanding and gentle, each chime rolling through the cobblestone streets like a wave, touching every corner of the old town before fading into the hills beyond. She's lost track of how long she's been walking. Time moves differently in these cozy historical places, stretching and contracting according to its own logic rather than the relentless tick of digital clocks. The sound of the bell feels like permission, somehow, to begin the journey back, to let the night complete itself. Around her, the last few lit windows are going dark, residents surrendering to sleep with the confidence of people whose routines are as old as the buildings they inhabit. The warm light through old windows that created such a welcoming glow earlier now exists only in memory, and in scattered pockets, growing fewer with each passing moment. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over a town once midnight passes, different from the quiet of early evening or the hush of pre-dawn hours. This is the silence of collective rest, when even the night owls and insomniacs seem to reach some unspoken agreement with darkness. Her footsteps sound louder now, more solitary, and she's aware of being possibly the only person still moving through these streets. But instead of feeling lonely or unsafe, she feels privileged, like she's been trusted with watching over something precious while its usual guardians sleep. The peaceful night wraps around the town like a blanket, and she can almost feel the buildings themselves relaxing, settling deeper into their foundations, exhaling after another day of holding up walls and sheltering lives. The slow rain has stopped completely now, leaving everything glistening under the occasional street lamp, and the cobblestones reflect what little light remains with a subtle sheen that makes the streets look almost liquid. She thinks about all the nights this town has experienced, tens of thousands of them, each one slightly different but essentially the same, each one witnessed by different eyes but remembered in similar ways. Every city, every town, every human settlement follows this same pattern. Waking, living, sleeping, dreaming, then waking again. We're not so different from these places we inhabit. We too follow rhythms that are both uniquely our own and universally shared. The bedtime calm that pervades everything now isn't absence-side's fullness, the rich quiet of a day completed, of energy well spent, of stories told and heard and absorbed. As she makes her way back toward where she started, she notices how different the same streets look at this hour, how shadows have shifted, How certain details that were invisible before now stand out. How the vintage serenity of the place reveals itself most completely when there's nothing to prove, no one to impress. A cat crosses her path with the unhurried confidence of an animal that knows these streets better than any human ever will. Somewhere a shutter creaks in the wind. A distant dog barks once, then settles. These small sounds don't disturb the silence. They deepen it, the way a few notes can make you more aware of the spaces between them. She realizes that what she's been seeking all night without quite knowing she was seeking, it is this feeling of completion, this sense that a circle has closed, that the gentle storytelling of the town has reached its natural pause. Every night, cities fall asleep and, we with them, surrendering to the ancient need for rest, for darkness, for the temporary cessation of consciousness that allows tomorrow to feel possible. The timeless calm she feels now isn't about escaping time, but about accepting its rhythm, understanding that there's wisdom in cycles, in repetition, in allowing each day to end so the next can begin. As she reaches her destination, wherever that might be, she carries with her the accumulated quiet of these hours, the soothing narration of wind and water and footsteps and bells. The old town will wake again tomorrow. Its windows will glow again with warm light. Its streets will fill again with the sounds of life continuing. But for now, in this moment, everything rests. The buildings, the stories, the memories, the hopes, and in that rest there's a kind of peace that can't be found in constant motion. A reminder that we too need darkness and silence and the courage to close our eyes and trust that morning will come, carrying with it the echoes of the past transformed into the promises of a new day. So now you've walked these cobblestone streets with me. You've felt the soft candlelight warming your face. You've heard the evening whispers of old towns that remember what we've forgotten. But here's the question that matters. What are you going to do with this? Are you going to close this video, scroll back into the chaos, and pretend that the peaceful night you just experienced was just entertainment? Or are you going to recognize that something shifted inside you during this calm journey through time? Something that's been trying to get your attention for longer than you'd probably like to admit. Because here's what I know about you. You didn't stumble onto a sleep story by accident. You're here because some part of you is exhausted by the relentless performance of modern life, by the constant pressure to optimize and achieve and prove yourself worthy of rest. The timeless calm you felt tonight isn't locked away in distant towns you'll never visit. It's available right now in the way you choose to end your days, in the stories you tell yourself before sleep, in your willingness to slow down enough to actually feel the comforting atmosphere that exists when you stop treating rest like another item on your productivity checklist. So let me ask you directly, when was the last time you went to bed without guilt? Without the nagging feeling that you should have done more, been more, accomplished more? When did you last allow yourself the nostalgic charm of simply being tired without turning it into a moral failure? These cozy historical places teach us something our culture desperately needs to relearn, that rest isn't earned, it's essential. That peace isn't a reward for productivity, it's the foundation that makes any meaningful work possible. Here's what I want you to consider tonight as you finally let yourself drift off. What if the life you're chasing, the one that requires you to be constantly on, constantly available, constantly improving, is actually the obstacle standing between you and the gentle storytelling your soul has been craving? What if the warm light through old windows isn't just a pretty metaphor, but a literal invitation to create spaces in your own life that prioritize presence over performance? You have more control than you think. You can choose, right now, to bring some of that quiet history into your modern existence. not by moving to an old town or abandoning your responsibilities, but by recognizing that the peaceful rhythm of night doesn't require permission from anyone. It just requires you to stop fighting it. I create these journeys because I believe we're starving for exactly this kind of soothing narration, stories that don't demand anything from us, that don't try to sell us solutions to problems we didn't have until someone convinced us we were broken. The echoes of the past remind us that humans have always struggled, always felt overwhelmed, always needed sanctuaries from the storm, and they found them not through technology or techniques, but through the simple wisdom of creating rhythms that honored both action and rest, both light and darkness, both the busy day and the bedtime calm that allows tomorrow to feel possible. So my question for you is this: are you ready to stop treating sleep like an inconvenience and start treating it like the vintage serenity? It actually is a return to something ancient and true that your body has never forgotten, even if your mind has. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift during our walk through these old towns, then I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notifications, because this is just the beginning. There are more cozy historical places waiting to welcome you. More stories that will help you remember how to rest in a world that profits from your exhaustion. But more than that, I want to hear from you in the comments. What moment from tonight's journey stuck with you? Was it the cafe where nobody grows old? The bridge where we examined our reflections? The midnight bell that gave you permission to rest? Tell me, because your story matters, and because when you share what moved you, you help someone else recognize what they've been missing. This isn't just about better sleep. It's about reclaiming the slow rain and warm light, and evening whispers that are your birthright as a human being who deserves peace. So subscribe, turn on those notifications, and let's keep walking these ancient streets together, one peaceful night at a time.